Hey everyone, Gregory Douglas, the Creative Advisor here, creative advice for working musicians to fast-track their careers. And welcome to another Music Interview Spotlight. Today I'm talking shop with singer-songwriter and former frontman of the Push Stars, Chris Trapper. With 4 CD releases and several high-profile national tours, including a run with Matchbox 20, the Push Stars served to establish Chris as an authentic talent. His music can best be described as lyrically driven roots pop, with a knack for telling everyday stories filled with extraordinary characters, and he's here to share his own experiences today.
Look what the wind blew in. Look what the wind blew in. Look what the wind blew in.
It's so refreshing to meet somebody that is as humble as you are and as personable and yet as talented as you are. You began your career as the frontman for the late 90s alternative rock band The Push Stars on Capitol Records.
Yep.
And I wondered if you can talk about what life was like for you then and how it's changed for you since.
I was working a real day job in a hotel in Boston. I quit the day job because I was just burnt on it and started playing open mic nights in Boston. And then I kind of met my bandmates in both random situations. And so we formed a band almost kind of by accident. But our bass player knew a manager who knew a record company guy who had once run Chrysalis Records, who started a company called Imago Records, which at that time had Amy Mann and Henry Rollins were their kind of big 2 artists. And that company downsized, and then it became, just a large indie label. And right at that point, we signed with them. They had us, a bunch of old 80s metal bands. And so it was for $25,000 to make a record, release it, produce it, market it. And it was one of those things where it's like $25,000 to make a record. What? That's amazing. One of those things where, I guess we're a real band now. A couple years later, we built a fan base in Boston, and we played a showcase for maybe 13 major labels in New York City, which was a huge showcase, huge kind of buzz thing. Then we signed with Capitol because the president really felt like he was interested. Because every other label, maybe 1 or 2 guys liked us, but not the whole label. Huge record deal, huge publishing deal where I was able to buy my parents a house. It was just a weird thing because we really had no business plan. So whenever I speak to a young songwriter now, I always say, regardless of how talented you are, take one business class. 3 years into being a band, we were signing 150-page contracts. Now, most of that business that existed back then is kind of gone now. It doesn't exist. Or if it does, it's a real fraction of what it once was.
Right.
And it's a lot of things that we just didn't know. So the whole process was very much learning. Literally, right after we signed with Capitol, the president got fired. So we were somehow able to negotiate staying on board through the whole next label, which was all different people, all new staff. And a guy who actually worked for the new staff, he tried to sign us at a different label, which was Arista Records. And had liked us previously, so we were like, wow, we're set. We're the luckiest band ever because this guy loves us. He had a whole different agenda for us that we weren't necessarily comfortable with, and so we had a little standoff. And then eventually we were given the option to work with somebody we didn't want to work with or get dropped. And my bandmates and I talked, and so they said if we work with him, we all quit. And so then we said, we're not working with them, and they dropped us. And I always think that the people who do music, or basically any art form for a living, and turn it into commerce, that they have something almost insane about them, where it's this insane drive, where it's insane need for approval, acclamation. There's times when I'm driving 15 hours for one show, I just think, what is driving me to do this, literally and figuratively? And so I do think that there is this insane drive that makes it happen. Anybody I know who's more famous than me has a way more intense drive to work, much harder.
That's a very interesting perspective. Now that you say that, I really notice that pattern.
Right.
There is a pattern.
If you don't have your ego in check, you can go all kinds of negative routes.
Yeah, and I love the advice about needing all artists should take at least one business class, because I think even if you are not doing everything, even if you have a team of people, at least you can steer your own ship with the knowledge that you have and delegate.
Absolutely. The fact is, no one will ever care about your art more than you do. It's like they will shut down the office before you will. And they will go to bed not worried about it. But you ultimately it's your baby. If you run a band, it has even some degree of success, you're running a company. So we made millions of dollars over the 9-year span. So I could run a company. You're dealing with people above you, below you, you're selling product, you're doing all those things, managing, you're executing business plans.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Indie Music School is coming up. Want to step up your music career? For more info and free training, go to thecreativeadvisor.com/Indie Music School.